Man, it is so good to see you guys this morning. I hope you had an amazing week. I had Scrapple yesterday. Man, that's a great way to kick off the fall. Some Scrapple, some syrup. If you eat Scrapple with ketchup, you're doing it wrong. You got to have the syrup. Some of you guys might think that anybody eating Scrapple is doing it wrong. But hey, we're so glad that you guys are here this morning. If we have not been able to meet before, my name is Cotter, and I'm the Next Steps pastor here. And we have an amazing crew in the room. We also have an amazing crew that's joining us online. I think it's so cool that we have people that join us from around the world through the podcast during the week, through Facebook, through YouTube, through the app. So can we give everybody online a round of applause? So this morning we are continuing our series called What's Next, and this series is all about building on the foundation that we set a couple weeks ago at our baptism party Sunday. And if you weren't able to be here for that 2 Sundays ago, we had 18 people that took their next step of faith by getting baptized, going public for Jesus. Isn't that amazing? It was such a cool day. And so this series is all about talking about where we go after such a huge moment of faith. And so this morning, our message is titled, Don't Look Back. And we're going to be hopping into the Old Testament. We're going to read a really powerful story about keeping our eyes on Jesus. And we are hopping right into it this morning. So if you guys have your Bible with you, we're going to be reading from Genesis. Today, we're going all the way back to the beginning, and if you don't have a Bible, we have a stack of them out in the lobby on the same table as the coffee is on. So if you need one, please, on your way out, grab some more coffee, grab a Bible. That would be amazing. So the story that we are looking at today, it's about a place named Sodom and Gomorrah, and this is a very, very evil city. The people there, they just did unimaginable things. It was just a really bad place. And so we'll toss this first verse up on the screen. This comes from Genesis 18, starting in verse 20. It says, Then the Lord said, The outcry against Sodom and Gomorrah is so great, and their sin is so grievous that I will go down and see if what they have done is as bad as the outcry that has reached me. If not, I will know. So there's a city known as Sodom and Gomorrah, and the sin of the people there was so bad that God sent 2 angels to see if the situation there was really as bad as it sounded. And so these angels go there, and they experience how awful it is. Like from the moment they get there, it's just as bad as they expect. But there's one man and his family in that city that were resisting all of the evil taking place there. And he had made his home there, but he was not taking part in what was happening. And this guy's name was Lot. And so Lot was the nephew of a man named Abraham. So you guys may have heard of Abraham, talk about him a lot in the Old Testament. He was somebody who really loved God. And so this man Lot that we're looking at today, this is Abraham's nephew, and Lot loved Jesus, he loved God, and so these angels, they arrive, and they experience the wickedness of this place, and then they tell Lot that the city is going to be destroyed because of how bad things had become there, and so God gave Lot and his family a chance to be rescued before the city was destroyed. So in Lot's family, it was Lot, it was his wife, it was his 2 daughters, and then they were both engaged to be married. So 6 of them in total, his wife, himself, his daughters, and their future husbands. And so the angels came and they warned Lot, and then Lot warned the future husbands of his daughters. They thought he was joking, and so they just ignored him, and they went about with what they were doing. And so we'll move on to Genesis 19. We'll put this up on the screen. So Genesis 19, verse 15. So it says, With the coming of dawn, the angels urged Lot, saying, Hurry, take your wife and your 2 daughters who are here, or you will be swept away when the city is punished. When he hesitated, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. As soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, Flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains, or you will be swept away. So this destruction of this city is getting ready to happen, and Lot and his family are getting ready to leave the city, but Lot hesitates. He's not really sure if he wants to leave, but God says that the Bible says that God was merciful to them, and so he gave them a second chance. even though they hesitated. And so the angels grab their hands and they rush them out of the city to safety. And as they get clear of the city, the angel says to them, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back. Don't stop anywhere in the plain." And so the angels are saying, look, we have made it out of the city, and that is the first step to being safe, but you need to keep going. You need to keep going far away from here, and you can't look back. You can't stop. You just need to keep going, follow those instructions, and you'll be safe. But if you don't, you won't make it. And so let's keep reading. We'll hop back in with verse 23. We'll put this up on the screen. It says, "By the time Lot reached Zoar, the sun had risen over the land. Then the Lord rained down burning sulfur on Sodom and Gomorrah from the Lord out of the heavens. Thus he overthrew those cities in the entire plain, destroying all those living in the cities and also the vegetation in the land. But Lot's wife looked back, and she became a pillar of salt." And so Lot and his daughters, they follow the instructions of the angel. They got out of the city, and then they ran far, far away. They didn't look back. They didn't stop. And then Sodom and Gomorrah is destroyed as the angel said it would be. And so, it seems like everything's going according to plan. The evil place is destroyed. The good people have been saved. But then we read here in verse 26 that Lot's wife didn't make it. Lot's wife chose to turn back. She failed to follow the instructions. She looked back at her city and her home. She stopped running away. And because of that, she lost her life. And so we're coming off this incredible baptism weekend where we saw and experienced so much life change. And I think this story is so valuable for us right now because it's full of warnings about ways that we can lose sight of what we just experienced. And so we're going to look at some things that we can learn from this story. And I think the first thing that stands out to me is Lot's wife and her choice to look back on the city. And so when the angels came to Sodom and Gomorrah, they warned Lot's family of what was going to happen. They helped the family escape. They got them out of the city, but then they warned them not to turn back. And so we'll toss this next slide up on the screen because you can see both of these verses at the same time. And so the first one is their warning. It says, as soon as they had brought them out, one of them said, "Flee for your lives. Don't look back and don't stop anywhere in the plain. Flee to the mountains or you will be swept away." And then we skip down to verse 26, which says, "But Lot's wife looked back and she became a pillar of salt." And so this warning was very, very clear. The warning is don't look back, don't stop. And the consequences were clear. If you don't do this, you're not going to survive. And so Lot's wife, she knew the situation, but she still failed to obey. And what that really shows us is that her heart was not fully committed to God. Her heart was not fully committed to leaving her old life behind. That was her home. Those were her friends, and she was not ready to let go of that. God sent his angels to the family to say, look, this place is evil. This is not a good place for you to be living. You need to leave and go elsewhere. But Lot's wife, she didn't value the things of God more than she valued her comfort. And here's our takeaway from this. We can put this up on the screen. This is our first point today. When we choose to live for Jesus, we let go of our old life. When we choose to live for Jesus, we let go of our own life. Living for Jesus is saying, look, I am not going to live the way that I used to live. Everything in my life, all my choices, they're going to be based on what Jesus wants for me. So life becomes not about what seems good to us or what feels good or what seems right or what's comfortable and what other people are doing and what's easy. It's no longer about any of that. When we live for Jesus, it's about what Jesus wants for us. It's about what God says is good. It's about what God says is right. It's about following his commands, and it's about loving the people around us. And check out these verses with me from Hebrews chapter 12. We'll start in verse 1. I think these really explain the situation so good and go along with what we read in Genesis. So it says, "Therefore, since we are surrounded by such a great cloud of witnesses, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, and let us run with perseverance the race marked out for us, fixing our eyes on Jesus, So the section starts out with this word, therefore, and I love that word. That's like an exciting word. It's like, all right, let's get down to business. Like here is what we need to do. And so it says, so therefore, let us throw off everything that hinders and the sin that so easily entangles, fixing our eyes on Jesus. So we let go of our past, we let go of our sin, and we focus on Jesus. Now, how many of you guys did chores growing up, like around the house for your parents? If you're not raising your hand, you're either super lucky or super asleep already. But if you got away without doing chores, I'm kind of jealous of you guys. But our parents, they always had us doing chores around the house, me and my brother and my sister, and there were some that I just hated way more than the others. Like, there were some that weren't bad, like doing the dishes. I don't mind that. Taking the trash out at night after dinner, I hated that. It was dark and creepy outside in the woods, and I was not a fan of that. And one of the things that I hated more than all of the other chores was cleaning out the junk drawer. How many of you guys had to do that? Anybody? Man, cleaning out the junk drawer was the absolute worst. And every home has one of these, where you just put everything that you don't want to deal with. When Emily and I got married, we said we are not going to have one of those in our house. And we had one in that house. And then we moved, and we got a new house, and then we got another junk drawer in our new house. It just happens. Over time, you get all the random stuff that's on the counters. You just push it into the junk drawer, and it magically disappears. You got people coming over, and you don't want them to see all your stuff on the counter, just push it in the junk drawer. You got to do some meal prep, you need some counter space, push it all in the junk drawer. It all goes away. And after a few months, it starts to look like this. And there's some like random money in there. Our junk drawer never had random money in this. I found this online, but this is, other than the money, this is pretty accurate. And as a kid, I always hated doing this part, and you had to get all these cords out, and you had to get them all untangled, and it was just so brutal. And what I picture when we read those verses from Hebrews 12 is exactly like this, how all of these cords are tangled. That's what I picture when we read about how easily sin entangles. You know, when we're surrounded by sin, it becomes a part of us. We may not even realize it. You know, when you put your headphone cord and your charging cable into the junk drawer, they're not tangled when you first push them in there. But over time, after a few months, they become basically inseparable. And that's what happens with our lives when we allow ourselves to be surrounded by sin. If we put ourselves in bad situations and expose ourselves to things that we shouldn't, over time, that's going to become a part of us. It's going to influence us. And that's what we see happen with Lot's wife. You know, she lived in this city for years. It was her home. And the allure of the sin that she was surrounded by had an influence on her. She was around it every day. And that constant exposure to her numbed her to how bad it really was, and that sin entangled her. And so when the angel came and the angel said, hey, you got to get out of here, this place is going to be destroyed, and the angel told her not to look back, she couldn't do it. And the Bible says in the book of Proverbs, to fear the Lord is to hate evil, and Lot's wife didn't hate evil at all. Lot's wife entertained it. She lived surrounded by evil for years, and then when it came to the time where she had to choose between living for God or continuing to live surrounded by evil, she chose what had become so normal for her, and that cost her everything. You know, she lost her wife because she had been entangled in the evil, and she chose that over God. And this is such a heavy story. Like, these are real life consequences, but when we choose Jesus, we're also choosing to say no to the world. We're choosing to say no to the allure of sin. Lot's wife, she tried to have it both ways. She tried to escape and listen to God while also looking back at her old life, and that's not how it works. To choose Jesus is to reject our old life. To choose Jesus is to reject sin. It's saying, I'm going to live for Jesus, and I am no longer going to live the way that I used to live. I'm going to follow Jesus' instructions for how I should live. I'm going to let go of anything in my life that doesn't reflect Jesus. And it's so important for us to evaluate the things that we are allowing into our lives. Because when we start to let sinful things into our lives, over time it becomes normal. And as it becomes normal, we start looking back more and more on our old life. And we cannot look back on we cannot look forward to Jesus when we are looking back on our old life. We cannot look forward to Jesus when we are looking back on our old life. Living for Jesus, it means letting go of our past, not looking back, only looking forward at our life with Jesus. And Lot's wife, she started out in the right direction. She escaped the city. Let's toss chapter 19, verse 6 back up on the screen. It says, the men grasped his hand and the hands of his wife and of his 2 daughters and led them safely out of the city, for the Lord was merciful to them. So she escaped the city. She began the journey away from her home with her husband and her daughters, but while she was running away, she didn't stay committed. She turned to look back. She took her focus off of God and she stopped. And she started admiring her past. And as she did that, she chose that over God. And so our first point today was that when we choose to live for Jesus, we let go of our old life. And we're going to add on to that for our second point today. We'll toss this slide up on the screen. When we choose to live for Jesus, we let go of our old life and we don't turn back. We don't turn back. And look with me to the section we read earlier in Hebrews chapter 12. Earlier we read verses 1 and 2, and we'll put verse 3 up on the screen. It says, consider him who endured such opposition from sinners, so that you will not grow weary and lose heart. When it says to consider him, that's referring to Jesus. And it's saying, think about everything that Jesus went through for you. Think about how he came here and he lived on the earth, and then at the end of his life, he was mocked and he was beaten and he was killed. And the whole time he went through all of that, he remained true to God. He faced all of that and he didn't waver in his commitment to God. Jesus did all of that for us, so we can endure whatever we face for him. We can remain focused on him no matter what challenges we face. When we deal with loss, when we are grieving, when we face anxiety and we're tired and we're worn out, we can remain committed to Jesus through anything because he did it for us. And also because he promises to help us. He promises to help us to not grow weary, to not lose heart. We'll put Isaiah verse 41, verse 10 up on the screen. It says, so do not fear, for I am with you. Do not be dismayed, for I am your God. I will strengthen you and help you. I will uphold you with my righteous right hand. When we are tired, when we are struggling, when it feels so hard to hold on to Jesus, God says that he will give us the strength to keep going. He will take away our fear. He will give us strength. He will give us help. But we have to choose to remain faithful to him. Lot's wife didn't choose that. You know, when life got hard and everything she cared about was being destroyed, she chose to take her eyes off of God instead of relying on him. And what this family was dealing with was so intense. It was such an intense situation, but Lot and their daughters, they faced the same trial and circumstances, and they kept their eyes on God. They kept their focus on God. Moving forward, they looked forward, they trusted God's promise to keep them safe, and they were saved. Like, life is going to be so full of trials. We will experience times that are painful and hard to walk through, but God promises to be our rock and our peace in every trial. We just have to trust him. We just have to choose to keep our eyes on him. We have to wake up every day and say, you know what, life is really difficult right now, but even though life is hard, I'm gonna open my Bible today. I'm gonna thank Jesus for giving me another day to be alive, and I am going to depend on him to get me through this day and to get me through this trial. When we choose to live for Jesus, we let go of our old life and we don't look back. And so we've been focusing on Lot's wife a lot this morning and her poor decisions, and I think it's time to kind of give her a break and move on. So I think for this last point, we'll look at Lot and something that we can learn from him. Because even though Lot made it out of the city and he was safe, he made some poor choices, and I think we can learn a lot from him. So we'll rewind in our story. So we've been reading this morning from Genesis 19. But if you go back to Genesis 13, we see where this whole situation began. And so we said earlier that Lot is the nephew of Abraham. And so Lot and Abraham had been living in the same area. And so over time, they were living in the same area, and their herds and their families and their possessions started to grow. And the area they were living in, it wasn't big enough for both of them to be there. And so they came together and they said, hey, this area isn't big enough for us. We want to keep things peaceful, so let's just peacefully split, go in different directions, and find different places to live so that we could both have enough room for everything. And so that brings us to Genesis 13, verse 11, and we'll put this up on the screen. It says, "So Lot chose for himself the whole plain of the Jordan and set out toward the east. The two men parted company. Abraham lived in the land of Canaan, while Lot lived among the cities of the plain and pitched his tents near Sodom. Now the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord." Now, a couple of really important details here. First, Lot chose the region that he was going to live in. We see that right from the start. It wasn't Abraham's choice. It wasn't anyone else's choice. Lot made that choice of where he was going to live and which section he was going to go to. Second, Lot had this whole region that he chose, and yet he decided to put his family right outside of Sodom. And when I first read that, I was like, that's interesting. Like, why would you choose to live there? And I thought, well, maybe Sodom wasn't so bad back then. But we see in this, it says, even at this time, the people of Sodom were wicked and were sinning greatly against the Lord. So Lot willingly chose to put his family right in the middle of a wicked and sinful city. And what Lot did was Lot failed to protect the people in his life. He placed his home in a city surrounded by evil, and this affected his family. His wife was affected by it. The men who his daughters chose to marry, they were affected by it. When the angel visited Lot's family in Genesis 19, there were 6 people in his family that they were trying to protect and help escape. Do you guys remember how many made it out safely of those 6? 3. It was Lot and his 2 daughters. The future husbands of his daughters, they ignored the warning. Lot's wife, she chose to turn back. She failed to keep her eyes on God. Half of them didn't make it out because the sinfulness of the city they lived in influenced them. And that sinfulness gained more importance in their life than their devotion to God. Lot chose to place his family in that spot. He chose to expose them to that evil, and it cost 3 of them their lives. Now look at this verse with me from Proverbs 4. We'll put this on the screen. It says, "Don't do as the wicked do, and don't follow the path of evildoers. Don't even think about it. Don't go that way. Turn away and keep moving." Don't do as the wicked do. Don't even think about it. Don't go that way. Turn away and keep moving. Is that what Lot did? No, not at all. Lot did the opposite. Not only did he choose to not keep moving, but he set his home in the midst of evil, and every day his family was exposed to it. They may not have participated in it, but their devotion to God, their standard of holiness, it decreased day by day as they were bombarded with all of this wickedness. And Lot's wife made her choice. She decided to not remain faithful to God, but her choice was impacted by Lot, who placed her in the midst of temptation and evil. He should have never placed his family there, in such an evil, sinful place. And so here's our final point today. We'll put this on the screen. Protect the people you influence. Protect the people you influence. We have a responsibility to protect the people in our lives. We have a responsibility to lead them, a responsibility to point them to Jesus and to protect them from evil. We all have people in our lives that are impacted by our influence. You might think, oh, nobody's impacted by my influence. Nobody looks up to me. People look up to you. People are impacted by your influence. It could be your friends, your spouse, your kids, your children, your siblings, your coworkers. And your life is a picture to them of what is acceptable. Your integrity, how you treat people, the shows you watch on TV, the music you listen to, the things that you talk about, the habits that you have, what you tolerate, what you allow into your life, that shows everyone that looks up to you what they can tolerate. It shows them what is acceptable. It's a picture to them of what is good. And we have a responsibility to protect the people that we influence. Lot's family, they couldn't resist the same things that he could resist. He was exposed to the evil and the wickedness of that city, and he remained committed to God. But half of his family wasn't strong enough to do that. And so he should have never placed them in that danger. Just because we can tolerate something, that doesn't mean that the people that we influence can. They may not be able to resist the same temptations that we can. And so we need to ask ourselves, what things am I allowing into my life? Who is being affected by that? And who is getting their sense of what is acceptable, what is right and wrong for my actions? Now, don't you guys think that if Lot had a chance to have a redo, if he could have gone back in time to Genesis 13 when he was picking which land he was going to pick, don't you think he would have chosen to live somewhere else? Don't you think he would have chosen to live as far away from Sodom and Gomorrah as possible? Like knowing what he knew, knowing that the evil of this city would cost his wife her life, that it would cost his daughters the lives of their future husbands, don't you think he would have done anything he could to protect his family? Now something we do in America to protect our family, we get dogs, right? Like a guard dog in your house. Emily and I, we have a dog. He is not a guard dog at all. He is just a fluff ball that loves everyone. We have a little staircase at the front of our house, and it's got this little tiny submarine window, and he can look out at everybody that comes to our door, and he just sits there and wags his tail because he wants to hang out with them. And then we got a picture of our dog, Koa, that we can put up on the screen. That's not him, but he exists. I promise. There he is. Oh, he's on the back. So it's all good. Don't worry about it. He's super cute. It would have distracted you guys. You can see it back there if you want to. That's him. He's our little Siberian Husky. Now, that picture, I used to take pictures of him all the time, and my phone storage would get full, and I needed to update my iCloud to get more storage because I had so many pictures of my dog. And then we had a son, and I have not taken hardly any pictures of our dog in the last year, and so that photo is 2 years old. You guys have probably already seen it before, but he got all of our attention before our son was born, but then ever since then, he doesn't really get the love that he used to. We still love him, but we don't give him the time that we used to. And so earlier this year, Emily and I started feeling kind of bad about that. And so we let our dog Koa sleep in our room on the floor. He's not allowed to sleep on the bed, but we let him sleep on the floor in our room, and he loved it. Every night, we'd be downstairs watching TV or whatever. Our dog would be upstairs, sitting outside of our door, waiting for us to go to bed, so that he could sit in our room with us. He absolutely loved it. While we were sleeping at night, every night, there he is. There he is. He's cool. Every night while we were sleeping, he would walk around our room, and he would eat whatever he found. Now, we don't keep food in our room, so he was eating tags off of clothes. He was eating socks and baby toys, and literally whatever he could find. He is like a little dog vacuum. And over time, we would find things in the backyard and think that's not ideal, but we let it happen. And then earlier this year, on 2 separate occasions, our dog ate things that didn't make it out and nearly killed him. And so we had to go to the animal ER twice to get things out of our dog. That was not fun at all. The first was a baby sock, one of our kids' socks. That was the worst. Horrible experience. Second time was a baby toy. It was a little stuffed basketball. That was a little bit easier to get out. But after seeing what would happen to him when we gave him the freedom to roam around our room at night, we realized that he is not capable of making good decisions when he's left alone in our room. And so he doesn't sleep in our room anymore, and the animal ER doesn't get our money anymore. It's just a win-win situation right now. But look, Emily and I have never been tempted to eat baby toys or to eat baby socks. But if our dog is left in a room all night long with that stuff, that is the only thing he is going to be thinking about. And so he doesn't sleep in there anymore. He's out of that situation. Lot in this story, he was able to live in this evil place without losing his devotion to God, but his family wasn't able to do that. So instead of exposing his family to that, he should have gotten them out of there. Now look, for Lot, it's too late. He's made his choices, but for us, it's not too late. So what things can you be protecting the people in your life from? What are the things that the people you influence are not strong enough to handle? Now look, can we get real for a second? What content filters are you setting up for your kids so they don't hear things and they don't see things that are not good for them, that they can't handle? Because they need you to do that. They need you to protect them from those things. What safeguards are you setting up for your friends? If you want to watch the football game with your friends, but maybe one of them struggling with battling an alcohol addiction, they're trying to kick that out of their life, maybe don't go to the sports bar with them to watch the game, where they're going to be surrounded by the thing they're trying to get out of their life. Maybe say, hey, buddy, come over to my house, and we'll watch the game, we'll drink Mountain Dew and water, and you won't have to deal with that temptation while we're hanging out. We support the people around us, and we help them fight their battles when we make sacrifices to protect them from evil. Lot's dream, the one place he wanted to live, was this one location, this one spot right outside of Sodom. But it wasn't what was best for his family, and so he should have given up his dream to protect them. When we look at this story of Lot's family, there are lessons that we can learn from Lot's wife and her mistake of looking back at this city and loving the city more than God. But Lot's wife wouldn't have loved that city more than God if Lot never put her in the situation to fall in love with it. So who are the people in your life that need your help to stay out of bad situations? Who needs you to support them in their fight against their past? Who needs you to point them to Jesus and protect them from the sinfulness and allure of the distractions in this world? We all have an influence. We all have people we influence. Your friends, your family, your kids. The great theologian, Peter Parker's uncle, aka Spider-Man's uncle, I think it was Uncle Ben, he said that with great power comes great responsibility. And I'm going to change that quote a little bit this morning to say, with great influence comes great responsibility. With great influence comes great responsibility. So who do you influence? Who is watching your life? And what can you do to point them to Jesus? What can you do to join them in fighting against their past and against the evil in this world? Lot failed to protect the people that were under his influence, and he put them in a bad situation, and it tore his family apart. We have the opportunity to act. We have the opportunity to come alongside the people in our lives to help them fight their battles. We have the opportunity to set up safeguards that will protect them from being overcome by evil. So how can you protect the people that you influence? And as we think about what's next, when we choose to live for Jesus, we let go of our old life, we don't look back, and we protect the people that we influence. Let's pray. God, I thank you so much for this story and this warning of what can happen when we take our eyes off of you, God. And I pray, Lord, that you will strengthen our devotion for you, God. I pray that you'll strengthen our love for you, and I pray that you will help us to get ourselves out of situations that are not good for us. I pray that you'll help us to look at our lives and analyze what things we maybe need to cut out to protect the people that we influence. I pray, Lord, that you will grow our love for you each day. I pray that you will grow our commitment to following you, and I pray that you will help us keep our eyes on you no matter what we face. I pray this in your name. Amen.